מסכת Bava Metzia, page 46. We'll start on page 45b. A fellow, Joe, it's a well-known businessman flying all over the world, and it was just a week before Chag HaSukkot, the festival of Sukkot. So he has this very interesting life that he is a world traveler, and his wife said to him, listen, getting close to Sukkot, it's just between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you better get an etrog. As you know, we have the obligation to get 4 species for Sukkot. So he said to her, listen, Sunday morning I'm flying, Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night, after Havdalah, I'll go to the market where they are already have out their sets, and I'll buy the esrog. So sure enough, he gets to that market, and this is something over the course of life, you know that it's unfortunate, but that's the way life is. You have the business people, the merchant, who are standing in different locations in the market, and they know, which we call in the Kabbalistic literature, Chochmat HaPartzuf. I'm joking. I meant to say they knew by your face if you carry money or not, if you are wealthy or not. How? I can't figure that out. But they look at your face and they make up their mind how much the price is going to be. I know it sounds very un-American and unfair, but that's the way people are. So to make long story short, the fellow, he looked at him and he said, listen, I can give you a good stuff, but I have the best etrog is out there in a safe. And sure enough, he called his partner, his boss, and the other guy, he already knew this fellow from shul. So he said to him, hey, so good to see you. I have something that is excellent, beyond words, the best etrog you ever see. Sure enough, he pulled out of the safe the etrog. He showed him, how much is it? $1,000. Just crazy number. So this Joe, this businessman, said to him, you know what? You have the deal. But listen, I'm flying in a couple of hours, and I'm not going to carry with me the etrog and come back a week later with the etrog to daven Sukkot here. So I want to pay you, and you bring it over to the shul when we daven. So the fellow said, sure, sure. Then he said, oh, wait. You know what? I have in the other safe even better etrog, and I'll give it to you just because we are such a close friend, but this is the best etrog you ever imagined. Now, Joe said, well, since I trust you and I knew you're going to do that and bring me the etrog, meanwhile, here's $1,000, I'm paying you. And what we learned in the past several dapim, the paying, it's not sufficient. He needs to do which we call ma'aseh kinyan, meaning to have the transaction, the exchange, to be halachically, by Jewish law, abiding. So the businessman said to the merchant, the one who's selling the etrog, you take this $1,000, and guess what you're going to do? You do the kinyan. You do which we call kinyan Khalipin. You get this $1,000. You give me the etrog, and I have you carry the etrog for me. He says, fine, but this is not going to be your etrog. The etrog I'm going to give you is the other one. He says, no problem. And he gave him the $1,000. Now, the question is that legal? Is that okay? We're all familiar with a Jewish wedding. the way that we have the chuppah b'kiddushin, the act of the husband and wife standing under the chuppah canopy, we know that the groom is committing himself to the bride by giving the ketubah, marriage agreement, he commit himself. Now, the way that we are doing it, and we explained it in the past several days, we take can be a belt, can be a handkerchief, it can be one of those things, and we ask the Chatan to lift that item, and then you have chalot kinyan, and then the transaction is effective. So we all know that if you go to a market and purchase a home, apartment, vacation home with cash, you have a deal. But since we learned that metaltelim, a movable property, lo niknim bekesef, just transactions over payment is not sufficient, only by having the act of pulling, kinyan meshicha or Khalifin, so the seller is lifting up the item, and by doing so, he basically gives the buyer the right. He's like acquiring, the buyer acquired the item from the seller. So by having Joe giving the seller $1,000, does that mean that the etrog it's already done, he sold it, or not? When it's come to chuppah, can we use a coin for exchange, kinyan khalifin, for exchanging between two parties? So that's the disputation between Rav and Levi. Rav, and soon you're going to read it, said that the seller received the money, and then he make kinyan hagbaha. In our case, he can lift up the etrog. Levi said it's not. So to be clear, when it's come to kinyan khalifin, we have two categories. One, it's called shaveh b'shaveh, which means that we exchange in an equal way between two parties. In the Talmudic time, it's like one fellow have an ox, the other fellow have a donkey. They agree that they're going to do this barter, this exchange. You give me the ox, I'll give you my donkey. Or another option, when you do a hagbaha, when it's lift up the item, as we explained, and by lifting up kli, which means a utensil, some item, you have ma'aseh kinyan, or kinyan sudar, as we said, a handkerchief or something like that, that's called kinyan sudar. So that's not equal, lo shaveh b'shaveh, it's not totally equal, and with the taking a clothing or something like that, that's kind of acquisition. The question is, do you treat it as a regular kinyan khalifin? And what's the problem? The problem we learned several days ago in the Mishnah, that the rabbinic enactment for all of this is a result of unfortunate situations, such as, it's called nisrefu chitecha ba'aliyah. Reuven, he owns, let's say, a place that have a lot of grain. Shimon wants to buy from him, let's say, half a ton of grain. So Shimon paid Reuven for that half a ton of grain. And since Reuven already received the money, if unfortunately the next day is a big flood, it's a fire, God forbid, or anything like that, Reuven said, who cares? I get my money. If it's burned, get lost. It's his problem. I have nothing to do with that. So therefore the rabbis interfere, and they said no. Ma'aseh kinyan, to have a transactions between two parties, you have to have meshicha, you have to have one party pulling the item, or as we said, chalipin, which means the Tosfot explained, it's not necessarily kesef, right? It can be exchanged between two parties. So here we are, page 45, B, 12 lines from the top of the page. Itmar Rav Velevi. אחד אמר מטבע נעשה חליפין, ואחד אמר אין מטבע נעשה חליפין. Here we have a disputation between Rav and Levi. Rav said that matbea, meaning coin, can become a khalifin, which is you can use a coin for exchange. So if a person does, as we learned in the Mishnah, in a way of transaction, it's called mekach umimkar. You go, you purchase a milk, and you pay cash. Okay, so that's the way, the manner of which we do transactions. I'm speaking modern days. But if someone does the kinyan sudar, which means you take a handkerchief or something like that in exchange of something, in nowadays selling the chametz, or the tnaim, when the two parties get together, the family of the groom, the family of the bride, and they agree upon in a X amount of time to have this couple getting married. That's part of that ma'aseh kinyan, the lifting up, and that basically make the transaction. So Rav said, yes, you can get this valuable item, like in our early case, the mocher, the seller, lift up the etrog, and matbea, that valuable, can be matbea, can be currency, becomes the exchange. So you can buy, basically, even buy the money. So if the fellow gave the $1,000 in exchange, this is basically applicable, and the fellow can go ahead and bring the esrog to a service week or whatever it is later during the festival of Sukkot. V'chad amar ein matbea naaseh chalifin. So the second view here said that no, you cannot use matbea, a currency, in order to buy by this matbea, by this currency, in exchange in kinyan chalifin. Now the Gemara expand on that, and this is Rav Papa. So before we go to the explanation of Rav Papa, again, I'm just using it as a springboard. I'm using an example. You have a fellow, let's call him Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen is a well-known, respected person who live, let's say, in the heavy populated Jewish area, Lakewood, New Jersey. He is going every year to a fellow that is doing a exchange, and he said, I need a $20 a bill for the value of $10,000, because what he does every year, it's a long line of people that's standing at his door, and during Purim he gives each and every person $20. So the money exchanger knows that Mr. Cohen is getting there, he gets this pile of bills in a value of $10,000. Let's go back many years. Now this year Mr. Cohen come to a money exchanger several days before Purim, and he says, listen, I'm waiting to get some money in one of the transactions, business transaction, but that check was deposited yesterday and it takes a few days to clear, but you know me for many years. Meanwhile, in a day it's going to be Purim, I need the $20 bill for $10,000 now. So the money exchanger trusted him, and he is giving him this block of $20 bill right away. Now, how that can be a real transaction between two parties? So he basically take a mitpachat, take a handkerchief, right, and he lifted it, and by doing so, Mr. Cohen, who needs a small exchange, So the question is, can a person does that in a sense of kinyan Khalifin? Because remember the scenario. Here Mr. Cohen is a well-known customer, beautiful. He is not giving now the 10K, but the money exchanger give him those bunch of bills in exchange of what? Of lifting up an item. So Amar Rav Papa, Mai Tama de Man de Amar Ein Matbea Menaseh Khalifin. What's the reason of Man de Amar? We don't know, and I told you several times, there is a book by the late Rabbi Reuven Margaliot Zatzal that tried to say to us who is Man de Amar, who is Chad Amar in the Shas. But anyway, with the assumption for our discussion that it's Levi. So let's say the reason for the one who said Ein matbea nasa khalifin, that you cannot use cash for the exchange, mishum deda'atei atzuta, because the recipient of that bill, of that, in those days it was a valuable coin, is the way it looks, which means that's called matbea chashuva, it carries value. Vetzuta avida devatla, meaning we, most of the time in Jewish history, we are scattered around the world. We try to be totally segregated from, and not to assimilate in the negative way with the society, but the reality is dina de malchuta dina. We part of society, we part of culture. We're not independent in autonomy and producing our own currency. So therefore, the king, the government, the president, whoever is in charge for that land, can come tomorrow and say, all these currencies are out of order, we don't use them. It's a new, especially those narcissists with my face, new one. It happens a lot in Jewish history, and it happens a lot in the world history, right? So therefore, that valuable currency, it's not a complete matter of currency that you can exchange in Khalifin and exchanging matters. And that's the notion of, let's say, Levi, whoever opposed it, to say that Ein matbea nasa Khalifin, that currency cannot be part of that exchange. And if you zoom in our Torah, you can find a clear-cut setup of Khalifin in the Torah. We have it in the book of Ruth. We're all familiar with the last parak of Ruth, when you see the transaction of Boaz with the shoe and everything. That's the barter deal with Khalifin. So it was a great rabbi and posek, whose name is the rabbi of Kovna, the Dvar Abraham. So he went to Switzerland at the early part of World War II, and then it's a well-known story when the crisis happened in Kovna, he went back from Switzerland to be part of his community. It's a very heartbreaking story, but anyway, he wrote a book called Birkat Avraham, and he discussed this matter. He says, if you go by Khalifin, you have the source of Book of Ruth, but using modern day term, when the jewelry business used to have, diamond business used to have mazalu bracha. It's something that people make those type of deal, or tkiat kaf, shaking hand, which take it very seriously. It's rabbinic enactment. The late Reb Chaim Naeh, Abraham Chaim Naeh, was asked, usually when it's come to selling of chametz, so someone lift the gartel, the handkerchief, or whatever it is. So it's always in the common denomination, the way that people use. But someone asked him, can someone use shoes? Because the whole source, you can tell me, it's from the book of Ruth. It's a discussion, how far you go with, because again, the direct source from the Torah, it's not, it's, the most you can say is the book of Ruth. So, can you tell me that using the mitpachat, using the handkerchief, can cause the full kinyan Khalifin, full barat, full transactions between the seller and the buyer. So Rav Papa said it's not an issue to get kesef, to get valuable cash in exchange of Khalifin. That's what we said happened in a ketubah, in a chuppah. You have maaseh kinyan, and you can do it. Now, the truth is, if you go by the bright, Tatnan hazahav koneh et hakesef, my love, b'chalifin, ushma min hamatbea naasa chalifin. Lo bedamim. So originally we said that when the purchaser pull out the gold coin, that's what we said in the Mishnah, he purchased the silver one. So one is that apply in a exchange, in Khalifin. So they said, no, over there we talk about damim, which means by pulling the gold, the other party commit himself to exchange, to pay in cash. Ihachei hazahav koneh et hakesef. Why we use the term, the gold purchase, quote unquote, the silver, we should say mechayev bibayalei, which means that the gold caused the other party who pulled to be obligated to give an exchange of silver. Tanei hazahav mechayev. So, to understand it even deeper, let's go to the next level, which is hachenami mistava midiktanei sefa. Because now we go to the last clause of the Mishnah, and from that we get more light at the end of the tunnel to understand this sugya. Hakesef eno koneh et hazahav. We say that the silver cannot purchase the gold. That's what we learn in the Mishnah, and what we derive from that. If you tell me in a normal manner of exchange, like sell and buy, mekach or mimkar, hainu de'amrinan, that's what we learn in the Mishnah. Dahava peira vechaspa tiv'a. What we learn in the past several days, we have the commodity, right, and we have the item. The whole idea of gold is the item, is the merchandise that you acquired, and the money, the kesef, is the cash, is the payment, right? V'tiv'a peira lokane, and therefore the tiv'a, which means the item, doesn't purchase peira. I want to give you some type of modern day example so it will be clear for everyone. We discuss chuppah. Imagine you have the Mesader Kiddushin, the rabbi, under the chuppah canopy, and he's a bride and a groom and a ketubah and everything else. And all of a sudden the rabbi said, I need a gartel, I need a mitpachat, I need an item. Can't find. Whatever it is, the old Litvaks, right? They don't have mitpachat, they don't have gartel, whatever it is. So the person who is the mafika iruim, the person who is the event planner, the manager, he said, wait guys, I have a good idea for you. Look at that area. You see over there? We have fruits that are so expensive and rare. You can't find it anywhere. Look at this, let's say, ananas, the pineapple. Did you ever see pineapple like this? We put this pineapple for the pictures. It's so rare. We brought it from the, let's say, Amazonas, who knows, from one of those rare places, the exotic place. And he brings it and he says, lift up, and we make kinyan khalifin with that ananas, right? With that pineapple. So now we said, Ela I amart b'chalifin, that silver can purchase gold. With the exchange, travau liknu adadi, meaning gold and silver can purchase each other. Ve'od tanya hakesef eno koneh et hazahav keitzad, machar lo 25 dinar shel kesef b'dinar shel zahav. He gave 25 silver coin in 1 dinar, gold dinar, even the owner of the gold pull out the silver, לא קנה עד שימשוך את הזהב, you not acquire until they pull the gold. היא אמרת בישלמה בדמים משום אחר לא קנה. Why? Because kesef, considering a tiva versus zahav, and pulling out tiva, it's not acquire peira. Ela yamad b'chalifin. If you tell me that the silver can be purchased by exchange, nikne, so the owner of the silver can buy the gold. Elamai, what do you have to say? Guess what? Bedamim. יחיה עם הרישה, הזהב קונה את הכסף כיצד? How? מחר לו דינר של זהב ב-25 דינר של כסף. If the seller sell 1 gold dinar in exchange of 25 silver, כיוון שמשך את הזהב, since the owner of the כסף, of the silver, pull out the gold, נקנה כסף בכל מקום שהוא. So now the silver can be purchased everywhere. היא אמרת בישלמה, that's good and well, בחליפין, in exchange, קניין, transaction. היינו, דקתני, that's what the Brita said, נקנה כסף בכל מקום שהוא. אלא היא אמרת, בדמים, היי נקנה בכסף בכל מקום שהוא, נתחייב גברה מבעלי. The Brita should say that the person, the owner of the silver, he commit himself to pay to the owner of the gold, which means we derive from this Brita that we are actually talking about Kinyan Khalifin. Amar Rav Ashi le'olam bedamim umay bechol makom shehu kemot shehu. So Rav Ashi said, actually this Brita speaks about real means of giving money. And what we said, wherever they are, it means exactly as the owner of the silver said to him that he cannot replace them with a different classification of coins. ומאי בכל מקום שהוא כמות שהוא כדאמר לי. So that's exactly the t'nai, the condition that he made with him at the time of the deal, at the time of the purchase. So they explained to us, כדאמר לי, אמר לי מארנקי חדשה יבין לך, if he tell you that I'm paying you from what? From a new purse, which means total new coins. לא מציעא ולמארנקי שנה. You cannot pay him from the old one, which is old coins. אבל גב דעדיף מניו. Even the old one is better than the new one. מה טעמה? The reason, דאמר לי, לישנן כמיבאלו. I have to leave it in my domain long time until it gets old, and therefore I prefer the new one that it will not turn black, not deteriorate, they turn black for too long. So אמר רב פאפא אפילו למאן דאמר אין מטבע נשא חליפין, מעבד הוא דלא עבד חליפין, which means he cannot do exchange by something else. יקנו ימיקנו בחליפין, the matter of transactions that if he wants to give the owner of that currency the item, so they can do it with Khalifin. You remember the story we said about the chuppah, about the trog, etc. So what happened? Rav Nachman, what the Rav Nachman tells us here? Peira le Rav Nachman lav afal gav de inhu lo avde Khalifin ikanu yemiknu b'Khalifin. So again, remember the story of the chuppah? So this event planner, he pulled out the pineapple and he said, guys, don't worry. You worry about the gartel, you worry about the handkerchief. No, don't worry. Here we have a pineapple and we can use the pineapple as the Nezikin al Khalifin. Can we do that? Rav Nachman came in and said, no, you can do it only by kli. But he agreed that what? That tiv'ana meloshna. So Rav Nachman agreed that if you go to a regular yarkan, the one who sell vegetables and fruit in a grocery place, we can go by the חליפין, which means to create a kinyan, לייצר kinyan by fruits, that's not possible. But to purchase kesef im חליפין, to purchase silver, it's not an issue. So here they bring a Mishnah in Tractate Maser Sheni, chapter 4, Mishnah 5, that speak about situation like that. Imagine a person living in Israel, let's say the northern part of Israel, far away from Yerushalayim, and he has a half a ton of apples, and he needs now to send to Yerushalayim. It's a big undertaking, right? Haya omed bagore. So this fellow, the owner of that tremendous fruits, he is standing in his estate, and he tried to circumvent the system. He tried to do artifice, to trick the system, meaning to give the second tithe without additional fifth, the 20%. Ve'en biyado ma'ot, he doesn't have the cash. Omer lachaveiro, which means, Rashi explained to us, shehu ohavo, meaning someone who's really close tight friend. ויודע בו שאינו עושה אלא כדי להיפטר מהחומש. So that fellow knows what's going on, right? Meaning that he will return that produce after they do this act of desacralizations, right? So he said to his fellow, הרי פירות הללו נתונים לך במתנה. So this Reuben, the fellow who lived in Galilee, he gets his body Shimon, and he said, guess what? I'm giving you this half a ton of apple as produce, as total free gift. Page 46, וחוזר ואומר, הרי הם מחוללים על מעות שיש לי בבית. Fascinating. Let me use plain English so we understand this. You have Reuven, as we said, he is living northern Galilee. And he has a big orchard, a lot of apples. And now we have half a ton of apples. To go to Yerushalayim, to ascend to Yerushalayim with all the apples and everything, it's huge undertaking. So what did he do now? He has a buddy as friends. His name is Shimon. He said, come over, Sam. I need you to do something for me. He said, sure. He says, listen, you can take this half a ton of apples and I'm going to give you money. How? Listen the way it is. In general, when you go to an exchange place, we all know, you bring, let's say, 100 euro, $100. And now you want, let's say you're in Israel, you want shekels. So they give you bank's fee, in addition to the shar yatzig, the currency of today, the street money exchangers, different, sometimes a little bit different in the fee and different in the value. But in general, we know that there is a fee. So in a way, this Reuven figure out how to circumvent the system. So he figured out, wait a second, I have a half a ton of apples. When I do change, I need to pay amalat prita, which means I need to pay exchange fee. In Hebrew you call it hamara. Okay, that you need to exchange, so you need to pay the fees. these guys in the temple wants too much money, because they want that I'll take the second tithe to Yerushalayim, but every time I do these changes, this desacralization for the second tithe, I'm paying this fee. So guess what I'm going to do? Shimon come over, Sam. You are the owner. You see this property, this half a ton of apples? You are the owner. Sure, sure. Oh, so now well, guess what happened? This Shimon, he doesn't need to pay the exchange fee. The exchange fee applied to whom? To the owner of the estate. But the exchange fee not apply to him. So in this way, Reuben saved the cut of the Chomesh. Someone in the chat, in the private chat, asked me a question. Yes, I see it. Okay, so the question that fellow asked is about someone used it in the real estate in a way, very similar, that you go and you see a place, especially in Israel, you see it over there, I think it's 2% each party. So one fellow go and see the apartment, and then he sent his brother-in-law to buy it directly from the owner and try to take the cut of the broker, which obviously it's a violation. But here it's a different. When they do this action, Reuben said to Shimon, listen Shimon, I don't have cash. I don't carry any cash here with me. But guess what? I have money in Switzerland. So he goes to Shimon. He basically make him acquire half a ton of apples. And how we do that? Like using a little bit artifice. He said to Shimon, I'm giving you a gift. Half a ton of apples, it's yours. Or he can say to Shimon, listen, the produce in that estate, it's going to be mechulal, it's going to be desacralized over a safe that I have in Switzerland. Now, פודה פירות של חברו, פטור מחומש. If Shimon redeem the produce of Reuven, Shimon is exempt from paying that cut of chomesh, or 20%. So that sounds okay. Saved. Now, what happened if he doesn't have cash in his hands? So let's first read it, and then see how smart is those rabbis. They say, תמה דאין בידו מעות, אבל אם יש בידו מעות, לקלנו לאידך במשיכה, ופריק, דהכי עדיף, דהווה לי נוכרי. והיא אמרת, מטבע נקנה בחליפין, נקנו להם מעות לאח, אגב סודר, ולפרוק. מעשה הבדלת לו סודר. So what happened here? Reuven has no cash in his hands. One case. He told him the money is in Switzerland. But how about if Reuven give a gift to Shimon? He said, Sam, come over. Here is cash. He gave him the cash. Now, Shimon going ahead, and he redeem with that money the half a ton of apples that belongs to Reuven. So apparently the Gemara said that that's better. That's better idea. Adif. Why? Because it appears ostensibly that he is redeeming something that belongs to the others, right? Shimon with the cash redeem the half a ton of apple of Reuven. So the Gemara asks, "V'nakninu li alei agav karka." So the Gemara said, "Wait a second. If that's the case, why you cannot make kinyan? You can make act of acquisition, Reuven to Shimon, over the money that he has in Switzerland. What's the problem?" And that's the easiest way. Doesn't need to bother. I give you whatever I have in Switzerland, Shimon, and now it's all yours. Do whatever you want. And the next thing, Shimon, what we do? He do kinyani mitpachat. He take this little clothing and little handkerchief or girdle or whatever it is, and he do that act of purchasing, right? Over the right that you gave him, your estate, your money in Switzerland, he is getting this handkerchief, and you make this an exchange, and then it's yours, and you exempt from the chomesh, from the cut. But you don't do that. Maybe they circumvented but mean of land, which means let the owner transfer ownership of the coins to the other person by means of land, which means he performs an act of transaction concerning the land and includes the coin in the transactions. And the Gemara said, delayed the karka. Okay, situation here that Reuven is no estate. So the Gemara said, come on, what do you mean he doesn't have estate? What we said? That he is standing what? That he is Reuven standing in what? The scenario is standing on the threshing floor. So they said, Begoren she'eno shelo. Guess what happened here? Reuven is standing on a threshold floor that not belongs to him. So the Gemara said, Ve'ichpal Tana la'ashmuina. So you mean to say that this Tana makes an arduous effort to all this trouble just to teach us the case of a Gavra artilai deleit levelo chlum, the person who's standing kivyachol, figuratively naked, with nothing at all? Very unlikely that a Braita will be devoted to so a remote case, so far. El alav shma mina. So you know what? You have to conclude from all of this discussion. Ein matbea nikna b'chalifin shma mina. That money is not acquired by means of transaction of exchange. Meaning, the conclusion is that mitpachat lo ovedet al matbeot. That the taking the girdle or the handkerchief, it's not work on coins. And the Gemara explained to us that basically you cannot acquire, אי אפשר לקנות כסף מתפחות. You cannot acquire with handkerchief the כסף. כסף לא קונים עם חליפין. You cannot acquire money with this type of exchange. In a way, the same applies to ketubah. That's what we learned earlier. The whole idea of חליפין, if it's matbeot and kesef, it's not works together. It's not. So the af Rav Papa hadarbia. So how come Rav Papa say what he said? So you have to say that he's what? That Rav Papa retracted his previous statement that coins are acquired by means of transaction of exchange. Ki had Rav Papa havuli treisar alfei dinarei. Rav Papa is one of these people that was wealthy, and at that time he have tremendous amount of money, which was the 12,000 dinars that he lent to another person in a place called Bnei Chozai, that faraway place. Akninhu le Rav Shmuel bar Acha agav asifa de veitei. So what did he do? He is the lender. So in order to collect, he needs to give his agent, his representatives, the להקנות לשליח את הכסף. He gives the agent the right to get the money. So what happened is, in a way, what they try to say, because כי אתה נפח להפה עד טבח, which means that he transferred the ownership of the dinars to his agent, Rav Shmuel Bar Abba, by means of granting acquisition of the threshold of his house to him, to enable the agent to demand repayment of the loan on his own behalf. So this way, he needs to do it in order to make it happen in that contingency, which will be complicated matter. So it appears ki ata nafak le'apeh ad tavach. So they said that when Rav Shmuel Bar Acha came after repayment of the loan, Rav Papa was so happy and so pleased that he went up to the place called Tavach, very far away. So what do we derive from this? That Rav Papa retracted what he said, and he held that matbea eino nikna b'chalifin. That Rav Papa retrieved what he said. That he said that coins are cannot acquire by means of transaction of exchange. וכן אמרו להם מטבע נעשה חליפין, וכן אמר רבי אסי אין מטבע נעשה חליפין, וכן אמר רבא בר חנא אמר רבי יוחנן אין מטבע נעשה חליפין. Literally, the meaning is that money cannot be the item used to effect a transaction by means of exchange. But let's understand the concept. Can we have kinyan chalipin with kesef, with money? Meaning, imagine a fellow is blessed with family, wife and children. He lived, let's say, in one location. Let's say Far Rockaway, New York. And he called a contractor, a mover, and he put together a team that works full day, from the morning to the evening, to transfer his entire house to a large home in a different location in New Jersey. So the workers work all day, the mover and his employees, and they pull out anything and everything from that house. And all of a sudden, the end of the day, the fellow gets and said, well, I can't find my wallet. And he makes an inquiries, and it turns out that day earlier he was by his in-law in upstate New York, and he forgot his wallet over there. He confirmed, he called, it's over there. All these hard-working people, they're all waiting for their wages to get paid, everyone. So since he lived in Far Rockaway, he went to a local banker, a local money exchange station. The guy knows him for a long time. He said, listen, I need money now because I need to pay the people that work all day for me. And you give it to me, let's say, the $2,000 I owe them for a full day of working with so many people, I'll pay back another $200 for that. You jump on me, right? We are not allowed to give a rebate. We're not allowed to do interest. But he changed the terms. He said, it's not a loan. You're not lending me money. I pull out the valuables, and by doing that, I'm doing kinyan meshicha, and basically I'm makne lecha et hadinar. I'm giving these transactions toward you. Meaning, the 2200 that I have in my in-laws' house in upstate New York, by lifting up the 2000 here and pulling, I gives you the 2200 over there. So it means you do Khalifin with kesef, meaning you do exchange, you do Khalifin with currency, and also acquire that kesef with kinyan Khalifin, with the transaction of an exchange. All of that to circumvent the issue of interest. Now, in order for him to do the kinyan, for the Gemara's time it was the dinar, he is not in a state of lehamtin, to wait to get paid, but he received immediately the payment. Meaning, it's a payment for the service, is not an act of interest, it's the kinyan khalifin, it's the exchange between the two parties. Tosfot explain, if you go by the Mishnah, we have a proof that ein matbea nasa khalifin, but eiteve Rabbi Abba leula. The scenario I gave you is just in a different time, in a Talmudic time. They said, הרי שהיו חמריו ופועליו טובים אותו בשוק, ואמר לשולחני, תן לי דינר מעות, ואפרנסם, ואני אעלה לך יפה דינר ותריסית ומעות שיש לי בביתי. So instead of using the case I said here in Farakwe and upstate, I'm just, at that time, the fellow have donkeys and loaded and people help, and at the end of the day they want to get paid, he doesn't have his money right away, he goes to money exchange and he said, give me the dinar and I give you more than dinar, dinar utreisit, it's in addition money, it's like 3 sar, it's more than, it's like part of the dinar, but it's obviously appear like a interest, but it's the idea to do it right is from the money שיש לי בביתי. אם יש לו מעות מותר, ואם לאו אסור, if it's really true that he have in that house in upstate money, so it's fine. Agar natar, he can go and get it. But otherwise, it's prohibited because it's the rebate. If he doesn't have the money at the home at that time, it is a loan, and the additional payment is forbidden as interest. So the Gemara said, "V'isal kadatach en matbea nasa khalifin, havi aleh halva'a, ve'asu." So if you tell me that the money cannot be the item used to effect transaction by means of exchange, then even in a case when the employer had money at home, since the money changer does not acquire the employer's money at home by means of exchange, it is a loan, the additional payment is forbidden of interest. Ishtik ula display equanimity. he was just silent. Amar lei, so Rabbi Abba said to Ula, Dilma idi v'idi בפרוטטות שלנו, דלי קלעו טיבה, ואידי פירה הבו, משום מה כן נקנו בחליפין. So, the whole idea is that we have a concept that's called matbea with a tzura, or trot, that it's a it's during certain periods people used small, sometimes silver coins, which due to the size were unminted or minted with a form that did not make them particularly distinct. Some were so small that they were not counted but were sold by weight. So that's the way it was in those days. So therefore, it's called mutzar. It's not called matbea. It's like an item. So therefore, you can do kinyan khalifin, exchange, because metaltelin, a movable object, can be purchased by kinyan khalifin. Rashi brought another teirutz, another explanation. He doesn't do kinyan khalifin, but he takes the dinar, and he doesn't make the act of acquisition. Dinar, it's considering a matbea, a mutzar, an item. And the whole idea is the takanat chachamim, rabbinic enactment, as we said, shema yityakru, it may go high in a value. So, therefore, if he have in his hand, it's different story. Let's say, I give you more practical example. There are gmachs everywhere, anywhere. But let's talk about day-by-day gmachs from neighbors. Fellow is baking a cake before Shabbat, we're getting close to Shabbat, and all of a sudden he realizes it's late, he ran out of eggs. Knocked the door of his neighbor, or the gmach, and he said, can I borrow some eggs? Neighbor said, sure. How many you need? Said 3. So he went to the refrigerator, he pulled out eggs, but the egg size was the smallest possible. So his wife usually gets those small eggs, so he give it to him, 3 eggs. The neighbor take it, use it for his cake, and now the next day he wants to return. The problem is that the neighbor's wife, she always buy the larger size of the eggs. So now he wants to return the 3 eggs to his neighbor. So what do you do? It's interest, because he's returning now a largest egg and in return of a smallest egg. So if the question is here, what do you do? He take a loan of a dinar and he return dinar ut receipt. That's the question Tosfot asked. So he explained, when it's a loan, it's a problem. But if it's a mekach or mimkar, if it's a transaction of a business, then it's not an issue. But in general, Be'ezrat Hashem will reach a special parak soon. It's called Ezeu Neshech. They deal a lot with Hilchot Ribit. Anyway, let's go to our sugiyah. Amar lei Ula said, in dai kana medekatane yafe dinar utrisit velo katane dinar yafe utrisit shma mina. So evidently the Braita is not referring to his giving an actual dinar coin, but to other coins of lesser value that equal that value. Now it's a discussion among the poskim. Later on you see a hint of that in our upcoming sugiyah. You have a fellow that wants to take a loan, let's say for a state of value of 300,000. So the problem is, excuse me, when you do a loan, there's the issue of interest. So what do? He basically, quote unquote, sell the house and sell it for the highest price to his neighbor. We said in general that אין הונאה בקרקעות. When it's come to real estate, it's not a matter of charging more, but basically he circumvented indirectly the issue of interest by using the estate. But רב אשי אמר עולם מדמים ומפרוטטות, כיוון דאית לי נעשה כאומר הלוויני עד שיבוא בני או עד שאמצא מפתח. As we said that the se'ah b'se'ah, if you have the same in the other location, and the whole concern is a rabbinic enactment that maybe the estate, the movable property gets higher, and then it's an issue of apparent as a interest, but tashma. But here, bring a proof from Mishnah in Tractate Kiddushin, page 28, and here we need to break up the code, special code. Let's first read the text. כל הנעשה דמים באחר, כיוון שזכה זה, נתחייב זה בחליפין. All items used as a monetary value for another item, which means instead of a buyer paying money to the seller, they, like barter, right? They exchange items of value with each other. Once one party in the transaction acquires the item he is receiving, this party is obligated with regard to the item being exchanged for it. And that's the way they analyze the Mishnah. כל הנעשה בדמים באחר, מייני הוא? When they said all items used to monetary value for another item, what does the Mishnah mean in this phrase? מטבע, שמע מינה, ושמע מינה, מטבע נעשה חליפין. It's coin. So you derive from here that a coin can be an item used to effect exchange. So there are items that use מוצר משמש כדמים, use as a payment. כסף. So that כסף can use by קניין חליפין, that's permissible. So apparently מטבע משמש חליפין, that coin can be affect the exchange. אמר רב יהודה, הכי כאמר. Rav Yehuda said that that's exactly what the Mishnah is saying. 46b, כל הנישום דמים באחר, all the items that can be appraised when it's used for monetary value of another item, which means the value can be appraised relative to the value of another item, excluding coin, כיוון שזכה זה, since the seller, once the seller is the one who acquires, and he is the one who receives, he is the one who gets the kinyan, the acquisition, נתחייב זה בחליפין. So the other party, the לקוח, the purchaser, is obligated with regards to the item being exchanged for it. So here's the beauty of the Mishnah, that all items, not only vessels, can be used to perform the act of acquisition for a change. Rashi elaborates on that based on the book of Ruth, chapter 4, the story of Boaz and the 10 people that he gets together. So over there they speaks about kinyan. When they did the chalitza, they used the na'al, they used the shoe. The pasuk said in Ruth chapter 4 verse 7, "Veshalaf ish na'alo." So it means, as we're going to learn on the page 47, that later on the text in Ruth used the term lekayem kol davar, which means Rashi explained that you can do the transactions of Khalipin, of exchange, in any items. And that's basically, soon you see, it's a machloket. Hachename mistabra. It's reasonable to understand this, the meaning of the Mishnah. Midiktane seifa, what we see, the continuation of the Mishnah, keitzad, the example to that is, Echlif shor bepara o chamor beshor, shma mina. One exchange, they use the term that used in the Talmud, but the concept is the same concept. One exchange an ox for a cow or a donkey for an ox. So once this party acquires the animal that he is receiving, this party is obligated with regard to other item being exchanged for. So this clause explains the previous statement and employs the example of animals, not coin. Shmamina, and basically you see here that we speak about metaltelim, movable object, and not matbea, not a coin. ולמאי דסליק הדעתי מעיקרה, מטבע, the one that hold essentially, originally, that initially, that a coin effects symbolic exchange, my keitzad, what exactly the meaning when we said keitzad, how so? If one exchange an ox for a cow, once the party acquires the animal that he is receiving, this party is obligated with regard to the item that been exchanged for it. For example, that's one that involved a coin. So what exactly? So they said, Kamma upirei namei avdei Khalifin, which means also produce can use as exchange, that it's not vessel. Keitzad, how? החליף שור בפרה או חמור בשור. So it means you see here that you can do kinyan חליפין, the transaction in exchange for two parties, also in the idea of using a produce. That's the way Rashi explained. It's a machloket rishonim, is a disputation among the early rabbis, what exactly involved here, what's the meaning of matbea. And now the Gemara comment that this is a Moraic disputation. Hanicha lerav sheshet de'amar peirei avdei Khalifin. We understand well if you go by the Rav Sheshet that said produce effect, the transaction of a exchange. Ha'ela lerav Nachman de'amar kli ein aval peirei lo avdei Khalifin. If Rav Nachman was standing under the chuppah, if you remember the story we mentioned with the produce earlier, so he said, well, if you have anything that under the concept of quote-unquote vessel, you can have kinyan chalipin, that exchange. But if you use the peirei, if you use the produce, you cannot produce kinyan chalipin. Later on, as we said on page 47, we expand on that. My keitzad, what exactly the example of the Mishnah that you don't need a vessel for kinyan chalifin, Kamma, yesh damim shehem kachalifin. There is a purchasing with money where one acquires the purchase item without pulling it, that is like a transaction of exchange. Keitzad, echlif dmei shor bepara. Or echlif dmei shor b'shor. So if one exchanged the monetary value of an ox for a cow, or the monetary value of a donkey or an ox, so one sold his ox to another for an agreed sum of money, and after the buyer acquired the ox, by pulling it, he then offered to give the seller his cow in exchange for the money that he owes him. So the cow is acquired without the seller having to pull it. So even the acquisition initially was to be an exchange, Khalifin, it is ultimately purchased for money, as the second animal is acquired as a result of the forgiving of the monetary debt. My Ta'amad Rav Nachman, what's the rational reason of Rav Nachman that said that ma'ot konot, money acquired, savar k'Rab Yochanan damar dvar Torah ma'ot konot. This is very important. He said that if you go by strict Torah law, monetary effect acquisition, which means when one pays money, he acquires the item, even if he's not yet performed another act of acquisition. So why is the sages put an enactment and said that you have to acquire by pulling? Gzeira, this is rabbinic decree. Shema yomar lo nisrefu chitecha ba'aliyah. He may say to him, your wheat was born in an upper story. So let's explain a little further with that. Let's say let's call him Mr. A, Abraham. He walked in a grocery store and he purchased milk from a fellow Yitzchak. And he pays him cash. So if you go by the way now we understand, biblically speaking, it's already act of acquisition. Kamma b'kesef. The moment Abraham pull his purse, pull out cash, leave it on the table, and give the cash, it's already acquired the milk. The sages have a concern. What is the concern? I'm using practical example just to comprehend the idea. Let's say we are in New York. Let's say you're going before Yom Tov to Brooklyn. You go to a store, a large chain of grocery store, and you pull out a card and you fill it up with the value of $500. Now, you sent, let's say, someone, can be family member, can be a maid, or something to buy for you. You give that person a list, they buy it for you. Now, they leave it at the corner of the store. Or let's be more modern, you call the store, you already paid in your credit card, and they put a card full of items worth for a couple of $100 at the corner of the store. Biblically speaking, you, for our discussion, Abraham purchased the item. The sages have a concern. What is their concern? Look how good and deep and ingenious in their feeling and understanding of people. The sages come in and said, since Yitzchak is the owner of that grocery store, if it was a sudden, God forbid, a fire, and all of a sudden Abraham card is by the end of the store, so it may happen, unfortunately, that Yitzchak is careless. Figure out, I get my money for that card, so why do I care if it's kaput, if it's a flooding, if it's a fire, if something happened? However, why should I call a fire truck to come and take care of that? However, the sages come in and said, no, as long as Abraham not come in and pull it, it's yours. What does that mean, it's yours? The same way as you come in and you can argue that the value of that item can change, and now it's worth more and you want more for that. In that sense, the full acquisition taking place when Abraham comes in a new store and pull out his card. And that's the beauty of the sages. Gzeira Shema yomar lo nisrefu chitecha ba'aliyah. If a fire breaks out or some other mishap occurs after a seller receives the money, he will not bother, God forbid, to save the goods in his house, because who cares? It no longer belong to him, and the buyer may incur a loss or even a great loss. So now we understand why Rashi elaborate, and he says, let's face it. In that sense, we can go further and say that if that wheat turned to be more valuable, the seller can come in and say, forget it, I can get more for that. So therefore, in a way, since you hold that it's his, until something happens, he will make a great, arduous effort to save the produce because he cares for that. Now, Now we understand the rationalization of the view of Rav Nachman. He said, Milta de shchicha gazru rabanan, Milta de lo shchicha lo gazru berabanan. The rabbis usually put an enactment for something that is common matter. But something that is totally uncommon, the sages not issue a decree. So as a result, the sages not apply this decree to this type of situation. So it was a great rabbi by the name of Braish, was a great posek. So they ask him a question, painful, complicated question. We know in the business world, it happens sometimes that mistake occurred. So it was a real case of Reuven, who has a bank account, and he asked Shimon to be the one who's kind of share a business account, because he needs to do in the business world, he needs to do transactions on a daily basis, to pay, to receive, to do all of that. So he put kind of not joint account, but the right to access to account to Shimon, but in the highest possible. It's almost like total joint account. One day, turns out that the bank made a mistake and put in, by mistake, $20,000. Shimon came in, and guess what he did? He wrote for himself a check for $20,000 and put it in his pocket. Reuven comes in from vacation, he checked all the bank transactions, and he realized that it was $20,000. Searching, it turns out that the bank made a mistake. So he goes to Shimon, they went together to the Beis Din, to rabbinic court. The problem is that Shimon said, you didn't do any kinyan, any transactions. It's like two people, remember we talk about it, two people see something valuable and they chased it. So what do you go, by the one who see it, or by the one who ran faster to catch it, right? So Shimon said, listen, you know, it's not something that you get it. It's a lost item, right? And I gain it, and it's mine. I catch it, and I get it in the pocket, and it's mine. Reuven said, but I opened the account, and it came toward my account, right? So Rav Braish have a big write-up based on our sugya, how you solve this issue. Ulereish lakish de amar, meshicha meforeshet min haTorah. I'm just giving you a vignette of what's going on, how practical is those discussions, and obviously one needs to ask a prominent posek to solve particular issue, because each case is different. But anyway, so according to Reish Lakish, that he said that meshicha meforeshet. Reish Lakish disagreed with Rabbi Yochanan. He said that pulling is explicitly stated in the Torah. Reish Lakish have a view that he said that the acquisition of movable property cannot be performed with money by Torah law, and therefore there can be no distinction between common and uncommon cases. So, Anicha Isavar la kerav sheshet, metaretz la kerav sheshet. So it means that you can do, based on the Mishnah, a transaction in any movable object, not just with vessels. אלא יסבר לה כרב נחמן דאמר פרא לא עבדי חליפין מטבע לא קנה היכם מתרץ לה. But if he goes by the Rav Nachman, that he said that produce does not affect exchange and a coin does not affect acquisition by Torah law or by rabbinic law, how does he explain the Mishnah? So they said, al kol chach, you have to say that kerav sheshet metaretz la. That's why Reish Lakish follow Rav Sheshet. So Rav Nachman follow the view of Rabbi Yochanan, that hold that midoraita, by the Torah law, you can say that nitan la'asot kinyan ma'ot, you can do an act of acquisition with the money. Only midorabanan, you cannot do it except those mikrim charigim, exceptional cases. But if you go by Resh Lakish, the whole of Sheshet, so the Mishnah teaches us that you can do kinyan Khalifin, the exchange, not only by movable object, and any movable object, and not only with vessels. So the son of the Avnei Nezer and the Shem Ishmuel was asked a painful question, and it's just the point I would like to conclude this shiur. It was in those days that bride, groom, the parents get together, they like each other, so the father of the bride gave the father of the groom money to buy a special clothing, the special fur head and special clothing for this upcoming wedding. Remember, this is Eastern Europe in those days. But he gave him a large sum of money. So he purchased all this clothing and everything, and unfortunately, several days before the schedule of the wedding, things fall apart and it didn't come true. So now the father of the potential bride, he said, give me my money back. The question is, when he gave the money, it was in order to purchase a certain clothing. And particularly it was a forehead that was a very expensive one. So the Hasidic world is called Streimel, that some of them, even nowadays, can be many thousands of dollars. There are those who come from India, that's not real. There are those who are real one. Anyway, it can be expensive. It's expensive. So the question is, by whom you do the maaseh kinyan? Because the moment the father of the bride give it to basically to the groom, the question is what exactly the act of transactions happen between the party, and if he can demand the item it's already used, it's meaningless to take the item, but to ask the value of the money that he paid for that item, it's a question that, based on our sugya, I have a long write-up by both. You see it in the Shem Ishmuel, and you see it by the book, The Son of Avnei Nezer.